So one of the things that is definitely becoming a theme with a lot of the group members is it's either that long since they've applied for a job that their CV is so far out of date, and things have obviously moved on very much. I mean, in the 24 years that I was teaching, I think I only had to rewrite my CV 3 times because I only did 3 job changes.
And also I think teaching CVs are kind of done in a specific way.
They are.
It's quite different to a standard CV because
that's
it's very specific to teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, that people are. One of the things that I keep trying to say to people in the group is if you break down that overarching header of teacher and actually look at the things that you did as a teacher, you've actually got a massive skill set, but it's about how you present that to a potential future employer. So that was the reason really for the reach out, in terms of trying to find somebody who this is their bread and butter, and they know the score, and who can give some advice about potentially reframing their CVs and what employers might be looking for, but then also from our point of view, some mutual support that you know there may well then be people within the group who get in touch and need your services to
sure. I mean, there's some technical side to it as well, where obviously with ATS now and stuff, you want CVs, they need to be formatted in the right way and stuff, and people can, you know, kind of trip themselves up by using some fancy template, which then doesn't get through ATS. Did you know what about ATS?
No.
It's applicant tracking system.
Right.
They're basically a lot of applications now, because obviously you apply for most things online now.
Yes.
If you go through really big companies, have them, like people like Amazon and stuff, and like if you apply for stuff through LinkedIn, if you apply any big recruiters use some stuff. It basically is software that scans the CVs, because they get so many applicants. They scan the CVs automatically, and it shortlists before someone like a human even looks at it. Which obviously means if you don't format it in the right way, which is actually basically just keeping it really simple, not having text boxes and color and all and columns and, you know, kind of the more fancy looking ones. If you keep it simple, like just a Word document, and keep it all straightforward and simple, that's fine. But you also need to match up keywords that are in the job description and make sure you kind of, because it'll give you a match to the job description basically. So be looking for, say, certain qualifications, maybe certain skills, certain phrases and stuff, or maybe a certain amount of experience, whatever. And it'll shortlist people based on that. Because it'll be like, I'll give them a percentage match, and it'll say, you know, they might say, oh, we want anyone who gets over 75%, we'll look at those CVs. And then anyone who doesn't get that, or has got a CV that has got a weird format and it can't read the information, they just get bitten off. So you might not ever get to the second stage, and you might have had all the skills and everything, but because you didn't have the right kind of CV.
Whoa, that has just blown my mind.
It's big. It's really important at the moment. A lot of people are, you know, get really funny about it and are like, oh, but it's not fair, you know, we shouldn't have to pander to some software. I'm going to do my CV however I like, which is great, but you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Unless you're directly sending it to people, you don't know if they're using ATS or not. A lot of big places are going to use them, especially if you're applying online, which, you know, for the majority of the time you are.
And that's not worth the risk. So different from the recruitment process for teaching, because that is manual. I mean, I've gone through
it precisely. It's very different.
As a recruiter, I've manually sifted through the CVs and done the long list.
Yeah, some still do, but because especially where you get such a large volume of people applying for jobs, you can understand why they use a system.
Oh yeah,
because otherwise, you know, you can't get through them all, and the only other option is to like either just pick randomly a certain number or cut it off after a certain number come through, in which case, you know, jobs are then not online even for very long. You know, they'll come and go before you've even blinked.
Because
it does move fast. But yeah, so I think there's advantages to it in a way, because it means they can accept a lot more applications, and it means they can sift out the people that are just randomly applying for everything,
yeah, so that like kind of
really irrelevant to them, but it is important. You have to kind of tick those boxes, otherwise
that kind of links to that that question of what employers are looking for, because then on the basis of what you've just said, that the initial bit is about matching to the job description, isn't it? And
yeah, you do have to do a bit of work. My advice to me is to have a really good CV done, obviously get that sorted, that we'll get through ATS and everything, but then every time you apply for a job you should be amending it so that you're matching some stuff that's in the person spec or whatever, making sure like the skills listed that you've talked about them somewhere on your CV and stuff, not lying, but obviously making sure that you're covering stuff, because often you've got a real breadth of experience, so you can't put everything on there. But they might say, oh, we need someone that's done this, and you think, oh, I have done that, but I haven't put it on my CV. And then you can just adapt it every time and just tweak it. You don't have to spend hours obviously every single time, but it's much better to apply for say 10 jobs and take the time and effort to adapt your CV every time, rather than apply for 100 by just clicking apply and sending the same CV.
So is there an optimum sort of size or length for a CV?
2 pages is generally the.
And what
you shouldn't really be going over 2 unless there's a really good reason.
Interesting.
Because it's just it generally doesn't get read. Occasionally I think ATS systems are set up to mark people down if they've got really big CVs, because I've seen some that are like 8 pages and stuff. People just waffle on. You should generally, the rule of thumb is you should be able to, at any level this is as well, because I do like CEO type CVs and directors and stuff, they should be able to get all the kind of summary of your skills experience on 2 pages, because at the end of the day it's not supposed to be telling your life story and every detail of the jobs you did. It's kind of, you want to whet their appetite, you want to highlight the things so that when someone reads it and they look at it and they're like, oh, okay, they've done that, we can ask them about that or whatever, enough to make them interested to talk to you. Obviously it needs to match what the job is, so they think this person could do the job, but there needs to be, you don't need to have every tiny detail. Like obviously having achievements and stuff is really important, but you don't need to go into the in-depth detail of how you achieved it, because they can ask you about that in the interview.
So that you're flagging things up, aren't you?
Exactly. It's like highlighting it.
So is there? I mean, I'm an ex-teacher, and obviously all of the people in our group are ex-educationalists, and I know as a form tutor and as a teacher of business studies and what was in the curriculum for business studies, that there are certain standard formats that the education system are telling young people should be their format for CVs, but my gut says that's probably not right anymore. That's probably still the very, very much the 1980s record of achievement kind of
I've still got mine.
Mine's somewhere.
I think because my GCSE certificates are all like in it and stuff.
I've lost mine. I had them in a pack.
10 A's, so I'm not going to lose mine.
Sometime. Well, mine were really good. My degree.
I've got thing I'm most proud of.
I've got everything, and it's somewhere in this house. It must be around, but I can't find it for the life of me. Anyway, I digress. So, just in terms of what would be the sort of key things that you would put in a CV? Because if employers ask for a CV, are they also going to ask for an application form?
Occasionally, it depends on the employer. Public sector stuff usually has an application form.
Okay, and
that's obviously different. But most generally, like the average employer doesn't, I would say.
Okay.
Like there's definitely certain sectors that still do. Okay. But yeah, in general.
So your CV is likely to sit alongside a letter of application?
Sometimes.
Okay.
So they don't always want cover letters either. It's good to have one, and that you can adapt for every role, but you don't always need to send one.
So different from teaching, because
it's very different to what it used to be like anyway, in general, for any.
So essentially your CV is a really brief snapshot to get your foot in the door to be able to go.
It is really, yeah. You need to get their attention, but not with like bright colours and crazy stuff. Crazy fonts.
About the quality of what's in there. So what should people be putting in?
So you want your name and location. You don't even have to have a full address, just like the location is enough. And then some way of contacting you, so email or phone number. If people have got a LinkedIn profile, a link to your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn's massive, actually. Really helps people find jobs. But anyway, that's another thing. That's another whole thing. And then an opening statement profile of like basically a summary of what you're about. And that's really should be the strongest part of your whole CV, because that's usually the hardest bit to write, but it's the most important, because it's the bit that usually most people always read, and it's kind of the bit that they read, and then if it's really good, that will make them read the rest, and if it's not really hitting the mark, they might not bother with the rest.
Got you.
So sometimes that's hard. You can sometimes ask other people maybe what they think of you, what they think your strongest skills are, or you might have had previous bosses or whatever that have said nice things about you. You kind of think, draw on all that kind of stuff, because sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself in that positive way. You have to really sell yourself in that first paragraph and be really, really positive. And obviously that's where I come in often to help people, because some people just really can't do that bit. Then I always have a key skills section, which basically summarizes your skills. You can either have, so it's normally 5 or 6 main ones, and you maybe write a sentence about each one, or kind of like explaining how you do things. I don't know, say it's leadership. If they're great leadership skills, I manage teams of this size, and I lead in a servant leadership way, or whatever it is. Better than that, obviously. Or some people, if they've got a lot of skills, so it can depend on the industry, can say do columns, which columns are okay if you use tabs to make them, not the word columns.
Right. Okay.
And they might have 3 columns of a lot of skills. Like if they've done, I don't know, there's some people that say do program change management and stuff. They've got such a lot of skills. You want to get all of those in because of all the keywords, and that could be a good way to like literally have them all listed there, but so it's easy to read. And then your career history, obviously in reverse order, focusing on achievements as well as skills. So things that you've made an impact and made a difference. So with school stuff, it might be people have like, I don't know, if they were the lead for something like literacy lead or whatever it is you call it. And then they did, when they were in charge of that, they did X, Y, Z. And so it might be something they did a bit different as well. Like not just, because obviously you did a teaching job. There's going to be a lot of things that are quite obvious, maybe. You don't have to go through the day-to-day obvious stuff you did necessarily.
So one of the things that I always looked for, and one of the things that I've been advising people to do is not just talk about what you did, but actually it's the impact of what you did.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Because when you think about an employer looking at it, they want to know what you're going to do for them, basically. They don't really care what you want. Like, a lot of people spend a lot of time in their first bit saying, oh, well, I'm looking for this and I'd really want this. And it's like, well, employers don't really care about that realistically, especially not when they don't know you. It's like, it's obviously good to know, like, what kind of person you are, and that you want to match, the right ethos and stuff in a business. So I'm not saying, it's just all about the employer, but when it comes to achievements and skills and stuff, they want to know what difference you're going to make if they employ you, don't they? Like, if you're going to come in and be able to manage a team and do something or whatever it is. So you do reverse order, obviously normally more on the most recent role, but basically more on the most relevant role. So whatever it is you're applying for, because you may be, before teaching, someone might have done, I don't know, marketing or something, and that's more relevant. They want to go back into it. Clearly they maybe spend more time talking about that role. And then education. Obviously, if you're a teacher, you're going to have a degree anyway, but you don't really need stuff before your degree, like A-levels and GCSEs generally. Obviously, some employers ask for it, and that's fine if they've asked for it, but most don't now. Like GCSEs, you know, if once you've done X number of years work, are kind of irrelevant, aren't they?
Okay. Okay.
I think a lot of public sector places still often ask you for GCSEs and stuff, but that's normally an application form anyway. So for some reason they insist on knowing like everything.
I mean, the number of people that we've shortlisted out of jobs, much against my better judgment in some cases, because they've not got an A level in a particular subject, but actually they've got a degree and they've got a postgrad and they've got X number of years experience. But
that's crazy. It's absolutely mental.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, generally, like in other industries, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Because, you know, especially if people have got proven experience and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, it might be relevant if, I guess, a teacher was moving into something they had done an A level in or something, they might want to add it in just as a like, well, I do know about this, if it's a real massive career change. But, you know, it's kind of using common sense, really.
And then
people spend a lot of space sometimes listing all their GCSEs and all the grades and stuff, and you think, no one cares. Like, it's not going to make someone choose you. Like, it's just, and then interests at the end, or, you know, any professional membership stuff like that.
Okay.
But then interests or hobbies, yeah, I mean, two minds about it. It depends. If you're interesting, not just if you just like cooking and going for walks,
then
don't bother, because it doesn't add anything. It's boring. Like, it's just generic. You know what I mean? It's nice, but it's like no one actually cares. If you've done, I don't know, competed as a triathlete at a certain level, or raised a lot of money doing walks or something across the country, then yes, put things like that in, because those sort of things will be, you know, add value and interest. Like any voluntary work, obviously, is always should be on there. And that's about it, really.
And is there anything general in terms of, because public sector is so different from private sector corporate, are there things generally that the private sector is more likely to be looking for than a teacher's role, for example? Does that make sense? Like, if you apply for a teaching role, it's very specific. It's very there's just a very particular process. But the recruitment process for outside of teaching is very different. I mean, the shock that some people have that the closing date was yesterday and they've not heard anything in the first 48 hours after the closing date. Whereas
you may not hear anything ever.
Whereas in teaching, you do, the closing date happens, the people shortlist the next day, you're in for interview the following week, and you find out on the day whether you've got the job or not.
Yeah, I remember that. Even with the TA role, they ring you really quick.
Very tight process. So I think just what's the difference? What's the reality in the private sector?
The reality is that it varies massively, I would say. So expectations should be lowered. But like, for the majority of people I talk to, often don't even hear back if they've applied for jobs.
Okay.
Some people, it takes a long time even after an interview to hear.
Okay.
Especially if they don't have it, they have to chase up to find out why they haven't heard of it. Be like, oh, sorry, you didn't get it. Okay. It's like, I don't know whether it's just to do with the volume or whatever, but it's not great often. It does depend. Obviously, some places are better than others, but yeah, I mean, it's nothing like that. It's nothing like teaching. And you know, every business does it in their own way as well, to an extent. It's often up to the hiring manager or whoever's doing it, however they decide to do it.
And is it standard in outside of teaching? So whenever I've interviewed people, the people who've not been successful on the day, we've always offered the opportunity to give us a call at some point so that they can have some feedback about how the interview went and so on and so forth. So is that normal practice in private sector, or is that something that would get you laughed at?
I would say it's happened sometimes, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily standard practice. I think if you ask, you can sometimes get feedback, but I do hear from some people that just get, but either no feedback or just really pointless, pointless feedback.
Not helpful,
like not constructive at all or whatever.
Okay.
So I think it's something it's worth asking about or whatever, but you may not get.
Yeah.
I think it's just the problem with it varies massively.
Okay.
There are less kind of rules or whatever because every business does it how they want to do it.
And obviously a massive thing with recruitment for teachers is the whole thing to do with criminal records check and safeguarding checks and so on and so forth. So what is there still a process there in terms of background checking when you apply for jobs?
I'm not so familiar with that, if I'm honest. You're probably better off talking to an HR person.
Okay.
I would suggest that that's probably varied as well. I mean, obviously not every job needs a DBS check, does it? Okay. So it would tell you if they were going to do those checks, I guess. I mean, they do referencing checks, but
yeah,
I wouldn't have thought many HR departments do a whole heap of other stuff. It depends on the role and stuff as well.
Fab.
So obviously some roles would be more, relevant to that and stuff.
So I think in summary, people who are applying for jobs that are outside of the education sector need to shift their expectations about the process.
Yes.
Understand that actually it's machine led at the start of
it may well be, and I think they need to be a lot more proactive, probably chasing it up and stuff like that as well.
Okay, and that actually the time scales could be quite long in terms of
yes, definitely. And sometimes there could be several, a number of interviews and stuff like that. Okay. Different, like, sometimes people have weird tests, or like there's all sorts. It can be like quite a few different ways. Yeah, different processes, definitely.
That's fab. That's really helpful. Thank you. See,
that's all right.
That's why I wanted to record it, because I knew that I'd ask you all these questions, and that would be job done.
I know, yeah.
So, what I'll do, if it's okay with you, we put our videos. We've got a channel, but all of our videos are unlisted, so only people who've got the link can go to it. It's not like a free for all on YouTube. But what I'll do is, what I've done with other people is I've edited the video, send them the link privately. I've sent you a connection request on LinkedIn. I'll send you the link so that if you want to share it, you can, and if you don't, then you don't need to. We'll put that in the group, but also I'll put your LinkedIn profile as part of that, so if people
cool.
feel that they might want to come to you for some specific advice that's personal to them.
I mean, it's probably worth mentioning I always offer free feedback on CVs anyway, like with no obligation or whatever, so that's just something I do. So I want to try and help as many people as possible, because it's a tricky time to find a job at the moment, especially. So
yeah, very much so. So I suspect that there may well be a few people who will bite your arm off the opportunity to get some feedback. And
because sometimes it can be simple changes that are enough. You don't necessarily need a professional writer to do the whole lot, but
okay. And that whole thing about the formatting is just like,
that's a big one. That's going to be important to people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, even just something as simple as that. When you said having columns of things is okay as long as you've tabbed them, immediately I've gone back to my I don't know, mid-20s when I was teaching kids the CLATE qualification for typing, where everything was about the old school, using tabs and all of that sort of stuff. And I think, whoa, that actually is quite mind-blowing that's
well, because obviously you can use that in Word, you can change sections, you can put section breaks in and change a section to be columns and stuff. But ATS generally doesn't like that. I think it can cause problems with ATS sometimes. It's just not worth doing it. And actually, if you have one of those fancy CVs that's 2 columns, like the whole thing, they can look really nice. But what ATS will often do is then read the whole thing across. It doesn't read it as a column, so it reads it across. So if you had lists of stuff, it doesn't matter so much, does it? If you're just listing words in a small. But if it's reading your whole CV across and it's 2 columns, it's not going to make any sense, and it's just going to sound like absolute nonsense. And so that's why you can't really do it.
Oh, I need to go and change my CV. Lovely.
And I think the problem is with it, we don't know who's using ATS half the time, so you can't guarantee whether they are or not.
No, so that's really interesting. Never even occurred to me that was some. I mean, I know that like if you submit assignments for university and stuff now, it goes through the checking software for plagiarism, and stuff like that. But it never even occurred to me that businesses.
I guess it's similar to that basically.
Yeah.
That's why you have to have certain margin sizes and all the rest of it, don't you?
Crazy. Thank you so much.
That's all right.
For your time. Sorry for disturbing your workflow.
No, it's fine.
And hopefully.
Sorry, I was late.
Oh no, don't be daft. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. I will crack back on, and you can crack back on as well. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, and you. Thanks, Sarah.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.